My man, my man, my man.
Hey, Lon.
How you doing?
Doing great, brother. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. How's the
Very-
world treating you today?
It's been a busy one, but it's treating me really well. Busy in a great way.
I hear you.
My my grandpa used to have a saying. He said it's better to be busy than bored, and I didn't respect that quite the way I should have when I was young.
Yeah, you hit a stage in life where all of a sudden that starts making more sense.
Yeah, there's a bumper sticker that I love too that relates to that. It says, "The older I get, the wiser my old man becomes," and yeah, it relates to that.
Funny.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. Well, look, dude, we're doing it. We're not wasting any time. We're doing this thing.
I love it, man. I'm not gonna lie, you caught me off guard, but I love that. I love it. I love a nice surprise for the day.
Look, here's in the spirit of talking about how just crazy days can get. So I sent you a note this morning, and just as a reminder, this has a chance of being a podcast, just so you know. So be careful what you say because it could go out there. Are you cool with that?
Yep. Yes,
All
sir.
right. So this morning, I've been feeling kind of whatever saucy. My book's out and I've got these things going on. I'm like, I need something that's exciting again, kind of in my life. And so I've been just playing around with things. And I saw your post this morning and I've been seeing your stuff and it's been fantastic. And I thought, well, look, I'm just going to hit this guy up and I'm going to see if he replies back. And of course you did. And I said, hey, do you want to do a podcast later today? And you said, I don't see why not. And so here we are, fast forward. So that all happened. Okay. And I looked at my calendar for the day. I'm like, this is a great day for me to just do crazy stuff. Okay. So my daughter, who's home from college, wasn't feeling well. So I had to run to the pharmacy and get her some stuff. And when I got back, there was a car in my driveway. And I'm like, well, who's here? And it was with public broadcasting. And it's a couple guys in a camera crew.
Are you kidding?
And
That's crazy.
no, I'd forgotten all about the fact that I had this whole day blocked off. I just forgot to look at my calendar at the very top. And there's a reason
Ah,
why my calendar was empty. I had this entire day blocked off to shoot a documentary for a friend of mine who's got a terminal illness. And so after kind of the dazed look on my face went away, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Well, come on in, guys. Let's do this. So, truth be told, I've spent most of my day behind on camera doing some sit-ins and stand-ups and things for this documentary. And then I came downtown to my office, and now I'm rambling with you. So, look, this is the most unpredictable. Who knows where this is going to go? I can't wait to get started. Conversation I've had in a long time.
I love it, man. I love when you hit me with no scripts. Let's just do this. And I said, all
Yeah,
right, sounds good to me.
yeah. I don't have any questions. I don't even really know your story. I don't really, but I think that's kind of the beauty of it. I think one of the things I'm going to try doing with some of my time and with my podcast is, most of my podcasts, they're not high production, but they're high value in content. And the people I talk to are fantastic. I mean, just absolutely. And it's not because of me. It's just because they happen to be fantastic. But one of the things I want to do is I want to do even less scripting, more immediate, just kind of, and I almost might even put a link on my website where, hey, you want to cut a podcast? Here's a link. You and I are going to be live in an hour. Let's do this thing. And, who knows what we're going to get. But I kind of view this as that. I kind of view this as, hey, let's see how this could go. Let's see how this could work. And we'll see if it ever becomes a podcast or not. But at the very least, you and I are going to get to know each other and it's going to be really cool.
Hey, I love that, man. And I'm always open to being the guinea pig for a new trial. So
Not a guinea pig, the first of. You're
the
the
first
you're the
up, there we
maiden
go.
voyage. You're
That sounds a lot more admirable.
absolutely. You're the one who's taking the risk out of this for me. It's making it happen.
I love it, man.
All right. Well, we're off and running. Look, so here's the deal. Let's set some ground rules. And I'm making this up totally on the fly. So you can throw some in too. Um, I'm gonna ask you questions that are probably gonna be all over the board. And I'm gonna want to get to know you as much as you're willing to share. If there's anything that you feel is off limits, just tell me. That's cool. We may or may not have that. That's cool. You're in control there. Um, if you have questions of me, go for it. Hit me with anything. And I have yet to have been asked a question that I felt was off limits. So good luck trying that, but you never know. You might actually find it. But let's just from there, we'll just kind of weave through a story, and we'll end at wherever the hell we want to.
Sounds perfect.
All right, man.
That's a
So
perfect movie.
let's start here. I'll set this up just briefly, and then we're going to be off to the races. So, look, you're a cat who started into my feed not that long ago, and your content is very you. You know, some people when they post, I can't tell if it's them or there's no consistency, and I don't get a vibe of consistency from them. And some you do,
Yep.
and some, there's names that we could probably both spit out of the people who are very consistent look, very consistent tone, very consistent message, and we know who those people are. But you immediately, and I have no idea how you landed in my feed to begin with, had a very consistent message and a consistent feel. And I'm like, all right, I don't know who this cat is, but I'm going to keep an eye on him. Um, and you kept coming up into my feed. I'm like, all right, and I like what you're saying. So fast forward, you'd put a post out there about Frank, who sent you a book, which is absolutely fantastic. I had no idea you had any interest in my book. This is before you and I don't even think we were connected on LinkedIn.
Yep.
I suspect I know who Frank is, by the way, and Frank is
Yep.
probably listening. Hey, all right. So there again, it just kind of was gelling with me. So as it came time to just say, hey, look, who could do this first up podcast of let's meet them where they are and see where they're going. I figured this would be as good as any. But tell me, there's so much of your story I don't know. And the parts of your story I do know are the parts that you very much want people to know about. So, but go back, if you don't mind, tell us, talk about your upbringing and your childhood and, just kind of walk us through in some chapters the early parts of your life.
Yeah. So, well, I grew up here in Denver, Colorado area, north side of Denver, and spent most of my life here. My parents moved from a tiny little town in Iowa of about 1,000 people. So they used to ship me back there for summers. So I kind of got a little bit of city upbringing, but I also got a good amount of small town farm life type upbringing as well. My grandpa was a milkman, raised cattle. He did like payday loans out of his living room, cool stuff like that. So, yeah, I got a nice little blend. Played sports from a very young age. Pretty much anything I could, any sport I could play, I played it, and played them all, pretty much all until the very end. Um, went to had a chance to go play some small college football after not really playing football. That was one of the few sports I didn't play very often, but I kicked and punted at a small school in Nebraska, and then I won some awards there. Had a chance to go play at a bigger school, so I went to Colorado State University, walked on there, and playing some pickup basketball, I tore my Achilles tendon, and that was kind of the unexpected end to my athletic career. Identity, my tribe. That was kind of the very pivotal moment in my life, and I did not realize it at the time. So I nursed that torn Achilles for about 9 months. And, obviously being in college, suddenly I went from a life of highly structured, if I wasn't at study table, I was at conditioning, I was at lifting, I was at practice. My whole life was planned for me. Suddenly I had all this newfound freedom without my tribe and without many good influences around me. And so, started to live a little bit more of what you see in the movies, college lifestyle, drinking too much and making choices along those lines. Still a good student, but, fast forward, college ends, and some of those bad habits kind of started to catch up to me. My grandfather passed away, the gentleman I just told you about. And that was really the first person as an adult that had passed away close to me. And so I kind of had an existential crisis with that a little bit. And about 6 months later, I really started having some struggles. I was starting to battle some pretty severe anxiety, started leaning on alcohol a little bit more to curb that anxiety. And that was around 2012, and it started to spiral from there. It was kind of a up and down journey over the next 5 years, but it really started to go off a cliff in about 2015, to the point where I hit rock bottom. I really didn't care to wake up the next day, and I heard a radio commercial in my truck. I was sitting in a Sprouts grocery store parking lot, and I was honestly debating ending my own life and how to do it without hurting people around me. And I heard a radio commercial come on of a guy's story who sounded very similar to what I was dealing with. So I turned my truck back on and drove home. I called those folks up and I started that program the next week. And that was my journey out. Um, I gained a ton of clarity, obviously, after I quit drinking, really started kind of trying to find myself, because most of my adult life had been kind of, me marinating my brain in alcohol, and had a successful career. Ended up starting my own business in that industry. This is part of the reason I resonated so highly with your story, though. I was following this path where I was really good at this job. I was making a lot of money. I continually getting promoted. I started my own company, grew it to, 15 million in revenue, was making tons of cash. But I was starting to have some of the same symptoms I had when I was drinking all the time. I had constant anxiety. I just wasn't happy. And I was, I had it made on paper, but behind the scenes, it just, there was a lot going on. And so I decided to cash in my chips at that moment. And I took some time to spend with my daughter, and I just did some soul searching, realized that I'd been sharing this story a little bit on LinkedIn, and I'd gotten a lot of folks who had reached out just resonating with it. So I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm just going to start trying to build an audience on LinkedIn, and I figure I'll figure this out as I go. So I started posting consistent message, just sharing my story, and figured I could try to help some folks. And it, through some conversations and some really good advice from a mentor and a coach that I had, it developed into my business, Catalyst Crew. So that's where we are today.
All right. Well, the podcast doesn't end there, man. We're going to go back and we're going to dissect this a little bit.
That's fair.
So let's start with this small town in Iowa. Look, dude, my hometown was 325. So
the drill.
A town of 1,000 is kind of intimidating.
I bet.
You probably even had a blinking light in your town somewhere.
There was no lights, but there was a few stop signs.
All right. Well, we share that then. Okay. So how long did you live in Iowa?
So I never lived there permanently, but my parents would ship me back there to spend summers with my grandparents. So, school would get out. Usually we'd go back in June, and, we'd stay. When we were young, we'd only go for a couple of weeks, but as we got older, we'd stay, from June till August and come back. Sometimes we'd ride the train home. Sometimes my parents would meet us halfway in Nebraska, and we'd start back school in Denver. So it was really interesting because as a kid, I didn't, I had grown up in the city and I'm in this small town. Like, what is there to do? But looking back on it, it was honestly one of the most transformative periods of my life because, small town life is very unique, and you have to develop a lot of different skills that you don't have to build in the city.
How old were you when you were going back from Denver to what was the name of the town in Iowa?
It's called Mount Ayr, Iowa.
Mount Ayr. Well, sounds really fancy. All right.
It's pretty fancy.
All right. So, how old were you when you were going to Mount Ayr, Iowa?
Yeah. So obviously, I'd go back to my folks, but I think the first summer I went back on my own, I think I was 7. And then, went most summers until I was probably in high school.
What kind of trouble did you get into?
Oh, all kinds. I mean, we we had the cops talk to us. The good thing about small town cops is that they usually just call the people that you're with. So my grandparents would come pick us up from the trouble we were getting in, breaking into the swimming pool after hours and blowing up fireworks and in the middle of the town square and, fun stuff like that.
I get a sneaking suspicion that you're leaving some important details out of some of the statute of limitations has got to be up by now. You can tell us the rest of the story.
There was one, the biggest trouble I ever got in was actually in Denver. No small town cops involved there, but some friends of mine in my senior year, it was like 2 weeks before we graduated. We had learned how to make a dry ice bomb, which isn't really a bomb. It's just, you fill a bottle with dry ice and you put some Mountain Dew or water in there and it expands and it pops. So we filled up a giant bucket and we put it in the dirt pile that the baseball team used to fill in all the holes. And we blew that thing to smithereens. There was dirt everywhere across the entire parking lot. Well, ironically, the same night, another kid had blown up a mailbox down the street, which is obviously not a good thing to do. They consider that a federal crime, and they were 3 blocks away investigating this as ours went off in the dirt pile. We had learned how to, in chemistry 2 weeks prior, how to do this, which is I think why there was multiple going off at the same time. So my buddy takes off driving. We're going like 100 through Broomfield, Colorado, trying to get away from the police, and we ended up having to go to jail. And we spent a few days in jail until our parents could get us out. So thankfully, I was a pretty good kid. Other than that, so the judge was pretty easy on me and gave me like 2 years of probation. But that was probably my best one. I got jumpsuit, strip search. Like I got put in the cell with the real criminals.
All right, you got stories. So I'm wondering, was your chemistry teacher in the cell next to you? Seems to me like he should be an accomplice of some sort to this kind of shenanigans.
That's what the joke was always at. We're like, you guys taught us how to build these. Like, why are we the ones getting in trouble?
Yeah, look, I think that's a legitimate defense. I do. I think that's I don't know if you want to go reopen this up, but if you go back, I think that's a legitimate defense.
Yeah, the good thing is it's hidden from employers. I don't think I can ever work for the federal government, but that's fine. I'd never really had any ambition to do that anyway. So,
all right, so there you are. Your post jumpsuit days now,
yep.
and you come to the realization that apparently, athletics has been a thing. Apparently, you've had some success, and you're welcome to talk about any of that. But at some point, you have real success, because even being a kicker, even if it's for a D2 school, I mean that's a substantial step that just not your average I'm a pretty good kicker can make. And then to get asked from a division up, and I don't know, I guess you said, which is Colorado State.
Yep.
Okay, so we're talking D1 schools. You had some real talent. Talk about your discovery of understanding. I mean, you knew all along from when you were, making bombs and running from cops that you're a good athlete. But at the moment you realize that, I can boot a ball. Tell me about that and some of your experiences on the field.
Yeah. So I ironically, I didn't play football much. I played football my 8th grade year of middle school for the middle school team, and I was a quarterback for them. And I was just an overall good athlete. I was fast. I could jump. I was a good teammate. Like things that help you excel in any sport, really. But I had played soccer. In fact, that was one of my soccer and basketball were really my main two sports that I played. But my junior year of high school, we made it to the state semifinals, and we lost in the semifinals. And that year was easily going to be probably our best year, because 10 out of the 11 starters on the team were going to be graduating. So we lost 10 seniors from the starting team. I was the only starter that wasn't graduating. And then we also lost on our bench. We had 10 people as well. We lost 8 of them to graduation, 1 to transfer, something like that. So we were going to have basically 2 varsity players returning, 1 starter, and we lost a decent amount of JV team to that as well. So my football coach in high school had been recruiting me since I was a freshman, because he knew I was just a good athlete, and it finally worked because that opportunity presented itself. And I had aspirations to go to the next level, and I knew my chances were going to be dwarfed if I was going to go 1-20 the next year on the soccer team. So I took the football coach up on his offer, and I went and played some receiver for them. But I mainly kicked and punted, and it was just because I had learned how to, kick the hell out of a ball playing soccer for all those years, that I changed my technique just a little bit. I did like 1 kicking camp, and I ended up getting some all-conference awards for kicking. And obviously that got me some attention. We were in the kind of the top league in the state of Colorado. So I got some attention from some local schools and kind of some in the smaller schools in the region. I knew that if I could go excel at a smaller school, I might have a chance to go somewhere bigger, because I just hadn't had enough time to get enough eyes on me. So my freshman year in college, the team at Hastings College, the team I was on, they had a senior kicker that year. So I basically backed him up. But my sophomore year, I played and ended up having quite a few really good games. I ended up winning National Player of the Week one week for the whole country, and it was only the second time anybody had ever won that at my school. And so obviously that got me into, some feeds of some scouts for some other schools. And so one of the coaches at CSU had reached out, said he didn't have much scholarship money, but it was a homeschool. It was about an hour from where I grew up. Obviously D1 opportunity. I was going to have to sit out because of the transfer rules at the time. So, but I decided to make the switch. So I left, went to CSU, sat out a year. And then while we were getting prepared for spring practice, that was when it was Martin Luther King Day. We didn't have school. I was playing pickup basketball at the rec center, and I came down on one ankle this way. I picked it up, stepped on one this way. It went the other way as well, and it tore my Achilles and probably 15 or 20 other tendons and ligaments in my foot and my ankle. And I was basically black and blue from my hip to the bottom of my foot. You could put a finger into the swelling, like probably this deep. And it was that way for months. And the doctor gave me way too many opiates to kind of deal with the pain. And then I started doing some rehab. And but that was basically it. That was my plant. It was my plant foot. And I knew it was going to take me probably a solid year to recover and be able to really actually put a ton of weight on that, especially the pressure you have to do when you're kicking. So that was that.
So you never had the opportunity to run out of the tunnel as a CSU D1 team member.
Nope, never did.
Um, you you left something on the table that I'm going to go back and hit on here, and that is your doctor prescribed you what, in hindsight, you termed as kind of a reckless amount of opioids to deal with what you were going through, the pain, specifically the physical pain. Is there more to that story?
I never got, I think they might have played, there's a lot of similarities between alcohol and opiates. A lot of the things they trigger in your body and in your brain. And I mean, when I say a lot of opiates, I mean, he gave me a ridiculous amount. Like I was on, oh gosh, what is it called? I had oxycodone for like acute pain. And then I was on this long lasting opiate that I took twice a day, every 12 hours. So I basically was layering two extremely strong, almost morphine level opiates on 12-hour stints that were kind of slow release. And then I was taking every 4 to 6 hours, I was supposed to be taking these oxycodone and it was Oxycontin. That was the other one. So it was oxycodone and Oxycontin. And it was a blend of those. And I was on those probably for 6 months. Honestly, looking back and you hear the stories today, like I feel very fortunate that that one didn't get me too, particularly with the susceptibility I seem to have had to addiction. But I do think that that probably played part of a role because that was kind of when things started to escalate a little bit. I didn't have the anxiety or some of the symptoms of addiction yet, but I remember when I quit them having some really bad stomach pains and really weird just sensations in my brain. And, mixing that, I didn't drink while I was on them, but afterwards kept drinking. And I think I think the layer of those two things may have had a part to play in that for sure.
So you've made mention a few different times, and they're again going back to who's listening to this podcast. It's going to be a lot of people who don't know Austin Moore. But in your run up to this story, you shared with us some challenges and struggles and life experiences you've had with addiction, specifically alcohol addiction. And I think we're working up into that. Before we go there, I would love if you would talk a little bit more about what you were feeling. I mean, you had to be coming to this realization after living what sounds like a pretty storied childhood, grandpa on the farm, parents in Denver, sending your summers with someone you've described as a mentor, that being your grandpa, and you've excelled at athletics. You found yourself in some trouble from time to time, but because you're a good kid, it also, you get rewarded for that, and you did. And then all of a sudden, you have this opportunity to become a practically a professional football player. And in today's world, it would have been an offer to be a professional football player with contracts and how students can be paid compensated. And then that's taken away. And in its place, you're left with a swollen foot, missed opportunity, and some drugs that are really powerful. Can you take us what happened next? I mean, how did your was your school impacted? Were your relationships impacted? Kind of break down for us, if you don't mind, just what was going on, what were you feeling, and what was going on in your life immediately after you realized that football was probably over for you.
It was interesting because I don't think I gave up hope right away. I hoped that I could rehab faster than I thought I did. I ended up rehabbing. Um, so I didn't give up hope right away, but I was very focused on trying to get better and doing what I needed to do. But I mean, it impacted pretty much every area of my life for a little while because I mean, getting just swinging my leg out of bed. I mean, it would take me 15 minutes just to like adjust to the pain level of the blood flowing down to my leg. And so, going to class and things like that, I actually, thankfully, one of the professors offered me her TA who was able to help do some of the things I needed to do. So she would actually take notes on the class for me, give them to me, and then I would do homework assignments. And if I had something, she had a recording I could watch and things like that. So that was really helpful. About, I'd say probably about 3 months in, when I'm still swollen, I've still got black and blue all up and down me, my thinking's been obviously altered by taking all these medications. I'm starting to realize that I don't think this is probably going to happen. That I'm not sure I'm going to get back. I do remember feeling some depressive feelings, though nothing like what I would feel in, a few years later. But I do remember that. And I remember very vividly one time we had some folks over at our house and we were kind of introducing ourselves. And I'd always, said, I'm Austin, and they'd ask what I did. So, I'd say I was studying economics and, I played for the football team. And I kind of remember having to realize that I didn't anymore. And that hit me hard. I still tried to connect to that identity for probably another 6 months. That I was hoping I would get to go back and play. I think the part though that hit me the hardest was suddenly I didn't have any of that structure. I'm a firm believer that freedom comes through structure, and this was the period of my life where I realized that I didn't have any structure in my life other than my class schedule. And before it was like, the coaches were coming through the dorms, waking us up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. with a bullhorn to go out and condition and study tables. And you were doing it with this group of guys that you just have this bond with like nothing else. Like I've never quite had a bond with a large group of guys like I did playing sports. And that was suddenly gone. And it was like, I had this group of friends, but they were those party friends that a lot of those relationships feel pretty superficial. And I felt that like I had fun with them, but there was never that common goal between us. And I do remember having kind of a big hole in my heart for that. And I think I filled it, and I think I was honestly coping with that too. Both with the opiates or drinking, depending on which time period you're talking about. But that was definitely a tough one to overcome. Looking back on it, I handled it not the best way that I could have. But I didn't also realize like how pivotal of a moment that was, for somebody that's played sports for that long.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you just hit it. You talked about your identity and, how what I call image, which is a term I preach on a lot, because an image is something we manufacture. That's what's on your business card. That's the first thing you say about yourself when you're introducing yourself. That's what you're attached to. That's what you want people to associate you with. I mean, it's totally normal. It's not a criticism. It's just how it is.
Yep.
It's why you're very strategic about what words you really want on your business card, what words you really want on your office door, and what words you choose to introduce yourself when the inevitable first question is, so what do you do? So
Right.
what do you do? And for you, it was, your credibility factor was the fact that you're a kid who was a walk on and then maybe even a scholarship kid on the football team. Well, holy cow, that's pretty fantastic. What a great identity, but what a great image to manufacture and put out in front of people. So it's totally normal. I don't think that there's anybody who's hearing our voice right now who will hear that and say, I don't understand that. We all get it. We all get it, and we're all guilty of it. And it's letting that go. It's letting go that image. That is the hardest thing in change. And the longer you've had that image, the harder you've worked to manufacture it. And by the way, manufacturing an image is not a negative thing, but
Right.
don't tell me you don't do it on purpose. You do. And so leaving it is really, really tough. And it causes you to make really questionable decisions because it leaves you in this fragile state. That's why so many people can't leave what it is they know they don't want to do anymore because their image is so tied up into what it is that they've built. So man, I totally get that, but I don't want to leave where we're at yet with you. Okay, so you're wrestling with some things. You're feeling some angst. You mentioned that you're in the economics program. Was that your declared major at the time?
Yep. It was.
And what did you think? So now you're a kid in college. You've had some success in sports. Looks like it's going away. But what did you think? Hey, when I graduate with this economics degree, here's what here's here's my mission for my life. What did you think your mission would be when you were early 20 something economics graduate? What did you think your life's mission was going to be?
You know, I had a professor. I had actually originally declared as kind of general business marketing, and I had a professor when I was at Hastings College that said you're extremely good at economics. You should really consider declaring this as your major. He kind of took me under his wing, and so I changed that right before I transferred. And so when I went to CSU, I did declare as economics, and I wasn't honestly totally sure what that would look like. I did start getting into the political realm a little bit. I actually went and campaigned for Ron Paul for a little while, and got into that world. And through that, we had done some work with the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, and we were doing a lot of forecasting on markets and the economy and things of that nature. But I had a really hard time seeing what that was going to translate to in real life. I didn't really think that, sitting there drafting formulas and coming up with, forecasts was really going to be my future. So I wasn't exactly sure what that was going to look like yet. I had had some interest the in actually securities. I had interviewed at Charles Schwab, and talk to them about doing either an analyst job or like a junior broker role. But that interview was more of a roast than an interview, and I ended up not getting that opportunity. So that kind of shifted it though, because I wasn't really sure exactly where I wanted to go with this. And the interview that I thought I had on lock, I went through like 6 or 7 rounds, ended up not coming to fruition. So I interviewed at a couple banks and wasn't really interested in that. And at that point, I got to this point where I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I look back on that though, and I think you're exactly right. There was still this image that I was really struggling with. I had this path that I had thought might be my future. And then all of a sudden I was sitting there with this economics degree, not really knowing exactly what that meant, or how to actually apply that to the real world. And so I took some odd jobs. I ended up in a purchasing role right out of college. Basically, that was looking at spreadsheets and dealing with inventory and things like that. I got really bored. Realized I was not a cubicle guy, but I was pretty much kind of in float mode at that moment.
All right. So you're floating around now. This is after graduation.
Yep.
Okay. And they're again not uncommon. I think probably most people listening probably have a degree that they may or may not have used over the course of their life. Not uncommon. Um, when did when did just the casual use of alcohol kind of start to set into your lifestyle?
Yeah, pretty much right after. It was honestly during college. I honestly didn't drink that much at the beginning. Like my freshman, sophomore year when we were playing, like we would drink after the game on, Saturday nights. But I mean, even Sundays, it's like we were out on the field doing, calisthenics and Pilates and all these other exercises to keep our bodies in shape. So I didn't really drink very much the first few years of college. It was honestly after that injury and the realization that that was kind of it, that I started drinking a lot more. It started on the weekends, and our weekends were usually Thursday through Sunday for football. And after I got out of college, it was I had toned it down as far as like during the week for the most part, but we would still get with the buddies and we would have way too much fun, starting Thursday night through Saturday. Um, and that was really my routine then. After my grandfather passed away, though, but this is like not that far after graduation. It's like 2012. I actually decided I was going to stop drinking and try to get back in shape. So I started getting up 5 a.m., running every morning. I'd have maybe a glass of wine at dinner with my girlfriend at the time. And that was about it. And I did that for about 2 months. And that's what's so shocking about this addiction thing is that one morning I just woke up and I had anxiety so bad I'd broken my teeth. I couldn't function. I couldn't sit still at work. I literally couldn't even look at the computer. I kept going back into the back where a couple of buddies of mine worked just to talk to them for a couple minutes. And then I would try to go back to my desk and I was fidgeting. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't figure out what's going on with me. I went home and drank some wine that night and it just kind of melted away. And that is where everything started because I started using it to curb this anxiety that really never went away. It kind of hung on for about 5 years.
So let's talk about that.
Yep.
I would imagine that for people who have been diagnosed, well, let me ask you, were you diagnosed with like clinical anxiety?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to be careful that I'm not using a term irresponsibly. And I think a lot of people, who have high stress jobs and put a lot of pressure on themselves have stress. And it can be confused with anxiety. But stress goes away with the situation. Stress comes with a situation, it comes with a conversation, it comes with a project, it comes with something, and it goes away with that project, it goes away with that situation, it goes away with that conversation. Anxiety doesn't. Anxiety persists. It is this constant drill bit through your heart, through your chest, through your mind, and it totally siphons all of your energy. And so I just feel like we need to just talk about what we're talking about with you because you said something I've never heard before. You said that you broke all your teeth. Like, can you just what did that talk about that? What do you mean you broke off all your teeth?
Yeah. I mean, I woke up that morning and I went into the bathroom and I remember I ran my tongue along the back of my mouth and these back teeth right here were literally sheared in half.
Your molars.
Yep.
And
And
was this just sudden? I mean, it's just like I know that it wasn't like a snap of a finger, but it was like give me a temperature gauge week by week. Did it go from a 1 to a 10 in 4 months or 4 days? What did this escalation look like?
so when I was running and trying to kind of get back in shape, I was actually in a pretty good spot. I remember I was struggling a little bit with my grandfather, and I didn't have anxiety though, like none. In fact, I'd never had it in my entire life. It went. I know it's hard to believe, but it went from 0 to 10 from one day to the next.
Wow.
And I woke up with broken teeth. I came home, drank, it melted away. I woke up the next morning, I had broken teeth again. And it was like, I had no idea what was going on with me.
So alcoholism, correct this. Um, Alcohol didn't cause the anxiety. Alcohol was how you were, it was the mechanism you had to deal with it.
Yeah. I mean, looking back, I think it's a combination of some things. I think that, drinking over, as much as we had for several years, I think could play into it. But I had cut back significantly for a couple of months. And so the fact that it hit, I've never quite figured it out. But there were so many things that happened then between the loss of the identity, the loss of a tribe with my teammates, the loss of my grandfather, and then just this floating through life. And it was like I had always had a direction and a path, and I had excelled at school, and I'd just been a natural at everything that I was always done. And here I am a couple years into the real world, and I don't really have a path. I don't like what I'm doing. I don't really care about it. I'm doing it because I'm getting paid, and I figure I'm learning some things, but that's really about all it's serving in my life. And other than that, though, I never quite figured out how it happened that quickly.
So you wake up one morning, you discover that you sheared off some of your teeth in the middle of the night. And you said when you were at work, you were in your cubicle and you'd go see some of your friends just to kind of take your mind off it. And then you'd go back to your desk and it never really went away. Can, can you talk a little bit more about what anxiety feels like at its most haunting and hurtful place? Put some words on what it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, I'll preface it with this. It's really, really hard to put anxiety into words, but I'll do my best. It When I say anxiety, a lot of times people think of what the distinction you just made of stress. Like people think of anxiety like that feeling you have before you take a test or before you go kick the game-winning kick in a football game, right? And there's some feelings there, obviously, but it's not like that. It's it's this feeling that takes over your entire body. It would get to the point that I don't know if anybody's ever felt this, but when you feel like your life is just kind of caving in and you feel like you just want to run away. It's almost like that, but it's with your own body. Like I wanted to get out of my own skin. Like it was squeezing me so tight that I felt like I had to get out of my own skin. And obviously that's impossible, but that's almost the sensation it gave me. Um, Obviously that's an extremely frustrating feeling because you can't really do much about that. Um, but yeah, you know, I ended up going and seeing a psychologist.
How soon? So how soon? We're in a tight window here.
Yep.
You go from, hey, I think I'm getting my life back together. I'm working out to, holy cow, I woke up and I ground off some of my teeth and I I don't know how to deal with this. To I need to see someone. How quickly did you come to the realization that I can't fix this alone?
So that's I went way out of the time window. Let's put it that way. There were probably a year and a half
So
ish.
what happened? What was going on in your life in that year from when it hit a place that was not something you could effectively manage on your own, which happens, to finally getting help. What happened in your life in that year?
So I was working at that job. Um, Having the constant anxiety made it really hard to. I actually had a pretty serious girlfriend at the time, and our relationship really started to get strained. I kept trying to tell her I don't know what's going on with me. She obviously is trying to probe, figure out how she can help me. I'm lost. I've never felt anything like this in my life. I'm trying to tell her I'm, struggling, but I'm not really sure how to verbalize that to her. We ended up having a falling out. So we broke up. I left. I actually quit my job as well. And I was basically putting the blame on everything in my life. I blamed my unhappiness and anxiety on her. I blamed it on my job. I moved all the way to the south side of town, about an hour away. I got an apartment by myself, and I started a whole different job. But as you can imagine, the problem did not go away at that point either.
Was it in this time where you would quantify it to yourself that you were at bottom, or did it get worse from there in that year window?
So it was pretty bad at this point. What's interesting, I'm actually thinking the psychologist I went and saw is actually further out than I'm remembering, but I got to a pretty low point. I was working at a car dealership doing finance for them, and I worked there for about 9 months. There's that initial excitement of a new job, and I felt okay for maybe, I don't know, a month or so. But I was really struggling. My bosses were constantly asking, "What's going on with you?" They were like, "You should be the top person on the sales board. Why aren't you?" I was still doing okay, but I don't know. I kept getting comments like that, and it was really bothering me. And I remember I walked out the back door one day, and I was talking to the one boss that I kind of trusted, and I told him, I said, "I don't know what's going on with me, but I feel like every single thing inside of me is broken and shattered, and I need to go get some help." And I called, this was before the psychologist. I went to my primary care doc, and I told him I was drinking way too much. I was having this anxiety. And this, we still got like probably another 3 year window after this, but he told me that I shouldn't say anything about the alcohol because insurance may deny me for future things. He gave me a bottle of Xanax, which, when combined with alcohol, is one of the most lethal combinations out there. And I started taking those in conjunction with drinking as well. Um, Thankfully, those I stopped taking those. I would take them later on in my story one more time, just trying to help. But I took those for probably 6 months, and they got me to a point where it was one of two rock bottoms that I hit throughout this process.
Wow. So at this point, you're living by yourself. You are single, newly single-ish. You're going through that transition. Um, you transitioned out of a job where you had friends into one where you made friends, and I understand that. And and at the same time, you're still wrestling with trying to figure out what in the hell's wrong with you, and blaming and doing all of those things that you do at that phase. Is there someone, as you look back, who showed up for you, either accidentally or intentionally, that you think probably knew, one, they knew who you are, and they see the Austin you are today, and they could see through that. But is there someone who was showing up for you then, trying to get you to um, take the right actions here to get your life back on track?
It's interesting because I have I have a very good family, and I have, my friend group's changed a lot since I went through this, but there was one friend I remember telling me that I was a shell of myself, and he was trying to figure out what's wrong with me. But I held a lot of resentment towards those folks afterwards because I didn't feel like they had tried to help me much. But getting out of it and looking back, like I don't know what they could have done because I was withdrawing from everything. I mean, I pretty much stopped having friends. We're about at that point right now in the story. I really stopped having friends. I pretty much hung out by myself all the time, and I worked, went home, and that was about it.
I think I think we have to talk about this just a minute, um, because I think there's a lot of people who have friends who are going through some version of what you have gone through. and they don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to be the right friend. So they say the wrong thing. And I did this as a dad. Austin, you've read my book. I mean, I own it. I was trying really hard to be the fixer, and I was trying really hard to be helpful to my daughter who was suffering with anxiety and depression. But I didn't know the language. I couldn't speak the language. And as hard as I would try to show up for her, it was the wrong, I was bringing all the wrong tools. And instead I was making it worse, very unintentionally making it worse. And so what she would do is get frustrated at me for bringing the wrong tool to the problem. And what I was doing is getting frustrated with her for not just letting me help fix her. So both of us frustrated with one another, both of us loving one another, but just not, we didn't have the same language. So me, I went and I learned the language. I had to figure out what anxiety and depression is. And I had to learn it and ingrain it in me so that I could have these conversations with my daughter. But not everybody knows that and has done that. I wouldn't have known how, I wouldn't have known what, I didn't know what to do when
Right.
it first happened with my daughter. What advice, if you have any, would you have for the friend of Austin's who's trying to break in, trying not to push you away or be pushed away? Is do you have any advice for that individual for how they can be helpful?
Yeah, it's a really tough one to navigate. I do talk to a lot of family members doing what I do too, who have people that are struggling. And the thing that I believe helps the most is being there, because they will distance themselves. And you all the best friends that I had did try to inject themselves into my life a little bit. Whether it was putting something together where it was like almost like I had to go, trying to get me out with the group so they could have a conversation with me. I think having conversations, there are going to be moments, and this is timing is going to be a humongous component on this. There are moments in that person's life when they are going to be more receptive than others, when they are down in the dumps and it's the morning or the afternoon and they're really struggling with something. There are certain things you can talk to them about at that state, because they're a little more vulnerable about, you know how are you feeling, because as soon as they start layering on the alcohol again, I mean, you might have a better conversation with them, but likely they're going to have a false sense of confidence about whatever, or they're going to say things they don't remember or don't actually mean. So I would say timing on it. The only meaningful conversation that I ever did have was a earlier day conversation, and it was that same friend who said I was a shell of myself, and it was basically he had organized a golfing outing where he said, "Hey Austin, we're gonna go out and golf. Your brother's coming. My buddy Steve's coming. I'd like you to come too." And he gave me that invite 3 or 4 times. I kind of tried to push it off, and he essentially forced me to go out there. It was 10 o'clock tea time or something like that, and that was really the only conversation or person that I think ever really got through to me during that entire window. Um, I don't I don't blame anybody for not giving it more effort. I just don't think they knew what to do.
If you don't mind, what's that buddy's first name?
Matt.
Matt. So two things. One, thank you, Matt. Two, I did a podcast in March called The Anxiety, and I talked to a guy named David Meehan, and he's gone through the same level of anxiety as you have. Um, and we talk all about it in that podcast. And he had a buddy named Manny. I don't know Manny's last name, but Manny came in very similar to Matt and saved his life because Manny went and bought him a crappy bike and said, "Let's go for a bike ride." And that gesture saved his life because it got him to, and it's the exact same advice you just gave. Get into a conversation before the damage of the day sets in. I mean, that's kind of what it is, so that you have a chance to break through. And he credits Manny with being that guy who showed up just like Matt showed up for you. And this is so important, and I want to bring this up because all of us get a chance to be a Matt and a Manny. You and your new job, which I really want to get to, we need to get there, get to be that. And it's fantastic. I feel like I get to be that, and it's fantastic. But if we can use conversations like this to help people who also want to do that figure out how they can do it, then these are the real conversations that I want to continue to have. So this is why the questions are so important, and I'm so thankful that you're willing to answer them.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, and I'm going to be releasing a community as part of my business. I don't want to promote this too much, but I do want to say that I'm going to be building a family and friends corner for people that have somebody in their life that is struggling. And through that, we're going to try and come up with some ideas on what's working for people, and just have a team of people so they can talk and get some inspiration and just have some hope that they're not the only ones too.
Awesome. Well, let's kind of start that transition. We've talked a lot about the low points, and I know that there's one more, and we should probably talk about it because you said there's two rock bottoms, and we talked about the first one. Um, and if you don't mind, step us through what you would call the second rock bottom and rounding out of it. What happened and what was the trigger to where you finally said, all right, enough. And what did that look like?
Yeah, so that rock bottom, we're looking at a timetable of probably 2013 at that point. So I've still got quite a journey in front of me here because I ended up quitting for the last time in 2017, July. But to get through that period quickly, because honestly, most of it is relatively similar. I did take a new job in the industry that I ended up working in for 10 years, in which I ran my business. And when I took that job, I don't know what changed. I kind of had, well, I had a group finally. I had a little bit of a tribe again. And I think I found something that I actually enjoyed and was good at. And that changed some things because for about a year, I felt pretty good. I was drinking a lot less. I had stopped taking any of that medication. I was excelling in my job. Um, and then ironically, I got to play the role of Matt or Manny with a buddy of mine who went down a very similar path. He was just a tiny bit. He was basically where I was a year before. And I met him and we became pretty good friends. And I could tell he was struggling. I was trying to kind of help him out of that, but I didn't really know how. I was also struggling. Um, Through that process, what's interesting though is it was almost like the anxiety from him kind of wore off on me. I don't think I was quite ready to help somebody else when I was still in that state myself. Um, and I'm a helpful person, and I wanted to try and help him, but right about that time is when I started to fall off too. Um, I continued in that same career path up until 2017. I got married to a woman very quickly that was not a great choice, and this was when I was back. I was back on the descent. We got married, and that was really when things started to spiral. I knew I had picked the wrong person. I kind of let her convince me to do this. She was wanting to get a citizenship in the United States, and that decision really weighed heavily on me. And I was in the summer of 2015, and it spiraled really, really badly after that. I was given Xanax again. I hadn't had many side effects from Xanax the first time, but the second time I was given them in 2016, and this was when it's the worst. And I went from weighing about 200 pounds to 250. I pretty much stopped eating. I would eat maybe 3 times a week. That was about it. I was drinking I would wake up at 3 a.m. and with horrible anxiety and pit in my stomach, I would literally drink a glass of wine just to go back to sleep. I'd get up at 6 a.m. I would do the same routine. I would drink a glass of wine. I would take a bite of ice cream, just like try to settle my throat and my stomach. And then I would go to work. And I was taking Xanax at the same time. And I ended up having a nasty seizure and what is described as delirium tremens, where you're basically, you're hallucinating. And it got to that point. I thankfully stopped taking Xanax right then because that was an extremely dangerous period that I was in. But I was so deep that I started thinking about suicide, and I really didn't care if I didn't know how to escape, and I'd been in this battle for 5 years. And honestly, the thought of just not having to deal with it anymore seemed like the best path. And that's what kind of led me there. I
And so
tried.
hold on.
Yep.
That's it's in this time when you're sitting in the grocery store parking lot
Yep.
and very serendipitously an ad comes on that was put there for you.
Yep. It was 100% put there for me.
Why did you listen to that ad?
Um, Sorry. I honestly don't know because the radio was on and I was probably there for a half an hour. And I don't know why. I just heard it.
What were you going to do? What would have happened had it not come on? What was your plan?
That's exactly what I was trying to craft. I had honestly thought about just swallowing an entire bottle of Xanax because I knew that would do it. I figured that would probably be painless, but
Why didn't you? Something was holding you back.
someone was holding me back.
What was it? What was holding you back?
There was there was not much hope left, but I think there was there was one strand still holding on. There was this tiny strand that this wasn't the end of it. Like I remember thinking very vividly that I thought I had messed myself up for life through this whole process, but I just I knew that I'd had such a good life beforehand that I just wondered, like, was this really the end for me?
So you're sitting in the parking lot and this ad comes on. And, as I imagine this, I literally can picture it as if I'm sitting next to you. I mean, it's so vivid. And I have to imagine that in that moment when you're hanging on by that strand that you talk about, you have this opportunity. You hear this and it's for you. And I have to just think that that's probably the weight of the world, or certainly the weight of the moment comes off, and you do something. You do something about it. You take the initiative to do something, and it doesn't matter if it's a really Jesus, this weighty thing like you're dealing with, or something much lighter. But in the moment you start taking some actions and doing something, everything about the momentum can shift, and it doesn't shift until you act, because thinking about acting keeps the inertia moving in the wrong direction. But actually acting, actually doing something, actually calling, listening, even listening to this was kind of an action. You probably had to memorize a phone number. I mean, this is probably in a day when you didn't have uh, might not even had internet on your phone, but you had to at least remember the name so you could Google them, so you could call them, and you did something about it, and it started a sequence of change in your life that's led you here. So talk about, if you don't mind, kind of, you've come out of that now and you find community again. I mean, it sounds to me like that's what this is. It's a community again. And how they helped. We don't need necessarily the details, but just tell me how they made you feel, and how your life started to kind of redefine itself.
Yeah, well, you bring up an extremely good point there because I think it was that hearing that ad and hearing this name and hearing this story, I immediately went home, and you're exactly right. I went from knowing something was wrong and trying to just suffer through this and fix it myself. I went from hearing another story about how somebody had had gotten help for themselves, and it was by raising their hand and saying like, I can't do this by myself. And so I went home literally immediately and I looked it up and I called them, left them a voicemail. They called me back probably an hour or two later and said, we'd love to see you. The CEO of that company called me personally. He's still a good friend of mine to this day. He called me that afternoon and we talked, and I went to their office. I think this was on a Saturday, and I went to their office on Tuesday the next week, and I sat down with them. And you're exactly right. I kept the momentum going. I knew that if I was going to solve this problem, right now was the time, because I knew it was going to kill me or I was going to kill myself, and that was like, it was that or this path right here. And so I went and met with them on Tuesday. I enrolled in the program. I told them I was going to, and I called my parents. They came over that night. I told them that I had figured out that I was, an alcoholic, and that I had been struggling for the last 5 years. Again, at this point, I'm 250 pounds. I weighed 200 right now. Most of it was all swelling. I just looked terrible. I shared a picture of it on my LinkedIn not too long ago. But I tell my parents that I found this program and that I've discovered what my problem is and that I'm going to get help. I went and grabbed all the hidden wine boxes from around the house and I brought them downstairs. And I said, get these out of here. So, they agreed to help me along that path, and they took all of that away. And yeah, I started that journey the next week. And you're exactly right. The program I went through, it had, I went through counseling. I had a coach, I had a fitness coach, and I did a lot of work in nutrition, just to get my body built back up. And I also met a lot of really good people. And what I tell this story quite a bit. Growing up, I had this image that the man struggling with alcoholism or addiction is the guy that's standing on the street corner begging for money. And that was the image I had. And for so long, I would not put myself in that bucket because I had been so proud. And that, I swear, I think that doubled the length of how long I struggled, because that was the image I had in my mind of who that person was. And I did not want to associate with that at all. Ironically, I get to this program and I start meeting these people that are just like me, and they're CEOs and they're entrepreneurs. There was a professional athlete there. There was former professional athletes there. I mean, moms, dads, like totally normal people. And I'm looking around the room like, what the heck was I waiting for? Like, obviously this is something that I'm exactly like these people. And that just, it shattered my entire outlook on life, changed in that exact moment. On stigmas and on stereotypes and just everything associated with that. But, suddenly I had this group of people around me that had been through a similar battle. And much like my football team or any of my sports teams, I had this group of people with a common mission, which was to better their lives. And it was like, I found my tribe again.
It's pretty beautiful, man. What is your mission today, Austin?
The mission of my organization is to change the notion that rock bottom has to be our catalyst for change.
When did you come up with that?
I came up with that out of a journal entry. I was writing one day about just some of my struggles, and I was questioning why do we have to get to that point before we decide to change our lives? Because a lot of things lead to that path. I mean, there's so many things that lead to the feeling of rock bottom, and all of our rock bottoms are different. They don't always have to be what I just described, but a lot of people do it with their careers. They work themselves to a point where they literally break. People do it with their finances, where they just have these horrible habits that end up putting them in debt where they're trapped. And it's like, why do we do that? And so I've been on a mission, both as an organization and myself to figure out why that is and try to change that for people and to give them this idea that like there's inside of you, you are the catalyst, and you have to realize that. Like this group helped me, but they merely guided me through the steps. Like it all started inside of myself. And there was so many things that I look back on, like the image of the man on the street corner, or you know, just this label of alcoholic that is so stigmatized in our culture, where I thought if I came out as that, I would ruin my career opportunities. I would have a hard time ever finding a wife. I didn't know what was going to come from that, but I knew as soon as that label was slapped on me that I was going to have a different future. And I fought that so hard. And so I want to normalize what I've went through. And I want to try to break the fact that people wait until it's too late. And I think a lot of that comes from what I just described.
Is your company's mission any different than your own personal mission at this point?
Not really. I mean, that's really what I try and do. You know, in my personal life now, though, my personal mission is to, be as good of a father as I can. When I started my last company, I ended up building a jail cell for myself, as I joke, because I turned it into the same corporate nonsense that I escaped from. And I'm going to build this company to support my lifestyle, not the other way around.
So in the last 45 minutes, you've taken us on a trip, man.
Yeah.
Um, and every time I talk to somebody who's been through been through life, and you've been through your own dose of life here. They come to this place where they've got to make a decision. There's I talk in terms of trades, and this is another trade, another fork in the road that you've made your decision on, and that is you have to decide at some point if you're going to continue to be a victim of the things that got you to where you are, and for you getting you to a rock bottom. You got to decide if that's the path you're going to stay on, or if you're going to take it and make a trade. You're going to trade it and start this recovery process, which of course you're doing and have done. And along the way, you learn a lot about yourself. And in fact, I would suggest that along the way, you really get to meet yourself for the first time and what you're made of. And I'm wondering if you can share with. Now I'm going to ask a different question. So you just took us through your story and this education that you have, this tuition that you've paid, the tuition of being a kid from Denver who spent summers in Iowa, a kid who had a shot at being on a D1 football team and have it taken away, a kid who woke up one day with severe anxiety and dealt with it through alcoholism, a kid who had people prescribing things poorly and led you to this place that wasn't helpful, even though they were trying to be. And you've got all of this education, and it sucks, and you probably wouldn't wish it on anyone. But now you've got it. And the next trade you've had to make is, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do? What do you want to do, Austin, with this education you have? All of the know-how and experience, good and bad, happy, sad, ups and downs. What do you want to do with it?
I think it's twofold because I wouldn't wish this on anybody ever, but it's probably the thing I'm most grateful for in my entire life because it's taught me everything. Um, I I get told a lot that, you know, I'm more mature. I'm 36. I think most people should be mature by this age, but I'm told I'm much more mature than a lot of people my age. And I credit that a lot to having to grow up through this process. I've never what I want to use it for is personally to educate my children and to show them, the path that I've been on doesn't have to be the path they take too. Um, and and also just for myself and for them to show them not to take a single day for granted, because I never will again. Because once you go there and you see you, I mean, you literally look over the cliff's edge of making that choice, and then you come back from it. I mean, the world looks a little different now. Let's put it that way. Um, but then, as far as for the world, because I love serving people. I love giving back everything that I've got. I honestly feel like I held this story to my chest for probably 2 years, very tightly. Um, I counted days. I gave that up, and I said, I'm going to share this. And at first, I shared, this much of it, and then it was this much, and then it was this much, and you know, now pretty much anybody who's gotten to know me, even on LinkedIn, they know pretty much my entire story. And I think the story can go to waste if we keep it to ourselves. There is so much that people can learn from this. And, I know that I'll coach, and I do coach lots of people who've gone through similar challenges, and they can learn a lot from those lessons. But I try and give as much of it away for free as I possibly can, because a story on a radio advertisement literally saved my life. And if one of my LinkedIn posts can do the same, then I've accomplished my mission. Let's put it that way.
How how are you hoping to use this education now? How are you bringing it to people through coaching? How can they, you know, how are you how are you using this tuition to pay forward the same radio ad that found you?
Yeah. So, I through that process, I learned a lot of tools. I put a lot of tools into the tool belt that I carry around every day, both for dealing with anxiety, dealing with depression, dealing with sleep challenges, dealing with relationships, dealing with your, careers, dealing with substances. There are folks that, you know, really have to get clinical help to get out of this mess. And there are folks that I've directed that way. But there's a lot of folks that come to me at an earlier stage, that I am able to help. And what I do is I give them, I try to essentially give them that education that it took me about 7 years to learn, more like 10 years to learn. I try to pack that into my coaching program and my community, and give them all of those tools and all of those resources that I've compiled during that decade of struggles, so that they can hopefully start to implement them into their lives, so they can navigate out of that challenge hopefully sooner than I did.
How can people find you, man? If somebody has a friend they want to talk to, has a team they're coaching that they want you to speak to, whatever, how should people connect with you and um, just learn more about you and figure out if there's a reason that this podcast and your voice found them today?
LinkedIn is kind of my primary presence. I'm on there, Austin Moore on LinkedIn, and you can also find Catalyst Crew on LinkedIn as well. Our logo has there's actually two on there. We have it's like two yellow triangles, says Catalyst Crew build you, and there's a little turtle logo in the side as well. That's us. Also, our website is www.catalystcrew.co. And those are the two best places to find me.
What can Normal 40 do, and what can I do to help support your mission, man?
Man, platforms like this are extremely important. Stories like this, I think we get snippets of things about mental health. I think we get snippets of things about addiction, but it's a very stigmatized topic, even though it's starting to become a little more mainstream. So, giving me this platform to be able to spread this message and actually let people kind of see the absolute down and dirty of what it can look like, that was extremely important. And I appreciate that a lot.
Absolutely. Well, one of the one of the things I tell myself in my mission, which is to inspire the change in 1,000 lives, and to motivate people to see their own lives differently, no matter where they're at, no matter where they're at, they have the right and sometimes the responsibility to see their life differently. And that's why I show up to LinkedIn. And I think your story is going to resonate. Someone's going to hear this story and they're going to reach out to you. And I don't even ever need to know about it. But if they find you, and Normal 40 in this podcast was the conduit from me to you, you to me, us to them to you, my mission is working. It's absolutely working. And I tell everybody, my metric is 1,000 notes of thanks. In that situation, I'll never know. I'll never know that they found you, and that's cool. I don't care, because that just means I really have to help 100,000 to get 1,000 notes to thanks, and I'm cool with that too, man. I'm totally cool with that.
I love that, man.
I was on my walk this morning, and weird things enter your mind when you're an entrepreneur or a solopreneur in my case, and you're just kind of in this alone most days. And I thought, how cool would it be if we could make Normal 40 not me? It's not a me thing, it's an us thing. This conversation is part of an us conversation as it relates to people going through things. How cool would it be if Normal 40 became cool enough that people actually had a tattoo? It's cool enough, it's cool enough to say, God dang it, I'm a Normal 40 crowd, and it's so cool that it's tattoo worthy. So now I'm noodling on that. Is this tattoo worthy? Let me
I
just
love
be the
that.
first to say, I don't have a Normal 40 tattoo. So
I was gonna say I was the first for the random thing. Maybe that'll be me. Who knows?
yeah. Well, if you want to do a Normal 40 tattoo, boss man, put a number 1 on it, because you'll be the first to have one. So
Normal
it'll be
40
normal, yeah, Normal 40.1. So that'll be the that'll be the metric. Man, I absolutely love your story. I admire your mission, and I've got a sneaking suspicion that you and I aren't done with one another. And I think you and I should be up to something again sometime soon. And who knows what that is and how that could look. But I really enjoyed this conversation, and I admire your authenticity, man.
I appreciate this a lot, brother. I've done a number of podcasts. This one was special, man. You got deep with me, and I normally don't cry when I tell that story, but man, you have a way of doing that. I can tell you that.
Well, you give a damn. That's where that comes from. And I knew it. I could see it in your writing. And that's what inspired me to reach out. So keep doing you, man. There'll be good days and bad days, and you know it. And if you're having a bad day, I'm a dude in your corner. You know how to reach me now.
You got it, brother.
All right, Austin. I'm going to see you on the next page, my friend.
You got it, brother. See ya.